Think your bad day justifies a 911 call? Think again. Welcome to the absolute peak of human entitlement, where emergency lines are apparently just customer support hotlines. We are talking about geniuses calling the cops because a sub shop forgot the marinara sauce, a salon cut their nails 2 millimeters too short, or McDonald's dared to run out of nuggets. Strap in for 49 of the most ridiculous, entitled, and hilarious first world problems that actually wasted police time. Let's get into it. 1. A very hungry middle-aged man in Florida visited his favorite local sub shop for a meatball sub. He explicitly asked for the special marinara sauce on the side because he loved dipping his sandwich. However, when he got home, he realized the tragedy that the employee had forgotten the sauce. He flew into a rage and dialed 911 immediately to demand justice. The operator told him this was not an emergency, but he called back a second time. He screamed that he wanted a police officer to go down there and enforce the sauce policy. The police actually arrived, but instead of helping, they arrested him for misusing the emergency system. 2. An elderly woman in a quiet suburban neighborhood was out for her morning power walk when she noticed something shocking on the road. A group of rebellious local teenagers had taken a black marker to the yellow deer crossing sign. They had drawn a male body part right on the deer. The woman gasped in horror and immediately dialed 911 to report a major vandalism crime. She told the dispatcher that the deer had been violated and it was obscene for the children to see. The responding officer had to try very hard not to laugh while taking the report on the defaced traffic sign. 3. A young woman walked into a luxury salon expecting the perfect manicure. She sat down and gave specific instructions, but the technician accidentally cut her nails slightly shorter than she wanted. The woman looked at her hand and screamed in absolute horror like she had lost a limb. She refused to pay the bill and pulled out her phone to dial 911 immediately. She told the dispatcher that a theft of service was in progress and she was being held hostage by ugly nails. The operator had to explain that a bad manicure is a civil matter. The woman left crying while the staff stood there confused. 4. A hungry college student pulled into the drive-thru of his local McDonald's craving chicken nuggets. He placed his order, but the voice on the speaker told him they had completely run out of nuggets. The young man felt a wave of pure anger wash over him because he had driven 20 minutes just for this meal. He refused to leave the line and dialed 911 to report a fraudulent business practice. He told the police that the restaurant was falsely advertising food they did not have. The dispatcher sighed deeply and told him to order a burger or go home. The manager watched him drive away in disbelief. 5. A determined little toddler in South Carolina found herself in a serious wardrobe crisis while getting dressed alone. She managed to get one leg into her pants, but the other leg was completely stuck and she could not fix it. She felt trapped, so she did exactly what her parents taught her for emergencies. She grabbed the landline and dialed 911 for immediate backup. The dispatcher answered expecting a burglary, but heard a tiny voice crying about trousers. An officer actually went to the house to check. He found the girl sitting on the floor half-dressed. He helped her put the pants on correctly while her grandfather laughed uncontrollably in the hallway. 6. A young woman in Texas walked into her bathroom for a peaceful morning routine, but got the absolute scare of her life. She lifted the toilet lid and saw a wet, frantic squirrel swimming circles in the bowl. She shrieked and slammed the lid back down immediately because she was too terrified to deal with the rodent herself. She dialed 911 and screamed that a wild intruder was taking over her bathroom. The operator calmly asked if she was in danger. She said the squirrel looked like it wanted to fight her. Firefighters arrived and tried not to laugh as they fished the soggy animal out and released it into the garden. 7. A confused burglar broke into a house thinking nobody was home, but he made a massive miscalculation. The male homeowner was actually awake, and he was much bigger than the thief. The owner cornered the intruder in the laundry room and refused to let him leave. The terrified criminal felt his life was in danger, so he pulled out his own phone to call 911 on the victim. He shouted that a crazy man was holding him hostage against his will. The police arrived confused about who was the bad guy. They realized the caller was the robber. The officers arrested him while the homeowner stood there, shaking his head at the audacity. 8. A nervous suburban dad was watering his lawn when he spotted a creature moving slowly down the sidewalk. It was a large tortoise that had escaped from a nearby yard. The man panicked and decided this was a public safety hazard. He called 911 to report a violent and aggressive reptile terrorizing the neighborhood. He claimed the animal was charging at people and moving with dangerous speed. The police drove to the scene expecting a monster. They found the tortoise eating grass and moving 1 inch per minute. The officer just picked it up. The neighbors watched from their windows and wondered how anyone could be afraid of a slow shell. 9. An older man decided to be generous and put 3 bar stools on the curb with a free sign. He went inside to watch TV but checked the window an hour later. He saw that someone had taken 2 stools but left 1 behind. This incomplete transaction made him incredibly angry for no logical reason. He called the police to report a theft because he wanted all 3 gone together. The dispatcher explained that free items can be taken by anyone in any quantity. The man argued that it ruined the set and demanded an officer find the person. He eventually hung up angry while the lonely stool remained on the sidewalk. 10. A grown man sat on his couch ready to watch the big game, but faced a massive obstacle. His girlfriend was holding the remote control and refused to change the channel from her reality show. The argument escalated quickly, and the man felt his rights were being violated. He picked up his phone and dialed 911 to settle the domestic dispute. He told the operator that his girlfriend was stealing his happiness, and he needed an officer to intervene. The police arrived at the apartment thinking someone was hurt. They found 2 adults arguing over television. The officers threatened to arrest the man for wasting resources if he called again. 11. A struggling 4-year-old boy sat at his kitchen table staring at a pile of math homework that looked impossible. He needed to subtract numbers, but his brain just froze, so he looked for a lifeline. He picked up the house phone and dialed 911 because his mom said they help with problems. He told the dispatcher he had a real emergency with his numbers. The kind operator actually stayed on the line and helped him solve the math equation step by step. His mother walked in to find him thanking the police for the answers. She was absolutely mortified and apologized while the dispatcher laughed about the easiest case of the day. 12. A rebellious 12-year-old boy in Ohio decided he was absolutely done with cleaning his room on a Saturday. He climbed out his bedroom window and scrambled onto the roof to escape his mother's demands. He refused to come down until she promised to cancel his chores forever. When she threatened to get a ladder, he pulled out his cell phone and called 911. He told the police he was being persecuted by forced labor and needed a rescue team. Firefighters arrived expecting a stuck cat, but found a pouting preteen. They told him to get down or they would help his mom with the chores. 13. A family of new immigrants in Vancouver looked out their back window and saw a terrifying beast they had never seen before. It looked like a giant cat with black bandit rings around its tail and sharp claws. The father panicked and locked all the doors immediately before calling 911. He described a mutant tiger prowling in the garden and threatening his children. The police rushed over expecting an escaped zoo animal or a dangerous predator. They arrived to find a fat raccoon digging through the trash cans for leftovers. The officers explained what a trash panda was, while the family stared in total confusion at the North American wildlife. 14. A Urawa controlling wife cooked a large roast dinner and expected her husband to eat every single bite on his plate. The husband was not hungry and refused to touch the food, which caused a massive argument at the table. The woman felt rejected and decided that wasting food was a crime against humanity. She dialed 911 and demanded an officer come to the house to force him to eat. She screamed that he was being abusive by starving himself to annoy her. The dispatcher explained that grown men can choose when to eat. The husband sat there silently drinking a beer while she yelled at the phone operator. 15. A teenage girl sat in her high-tech electric car in a mall parking lot when the battery suddenly died completely. The electronic door lock stopped working, and she felt the walls closing in on her instantly. She started hyperventilating and called 911 to scream that she was trapped in a metal box. She cried that the oxygen was running out and she would not survive the afternoon. The operator calmly asked her to look for a manual door handle on the side panel. She pulled the lever and the door popped open immediately. She sat there in silence, feeling incredibly stupid, while shoppers walked by, wondering why she was screaming. 16. A frantic man in Oregon found himself in the worst possible situation inside a public park restroom stall. He finished his business and reached for the dispenser, only to realize it was completely empty. He waited for 10 minutes, but nobody came in to help him out. He felt he had no other choice, so he dialed 911 for a supply run. He asked the police to bring him a roll of toilet paper because he was stranded. The dispatcher told him this was definitely not a life-threatening emergency. He eventually had to use his own socks to clean up, while regretting his lack of planning. 17. A sweet elderly woman lived alone in a large house and started feeling incredibly lonely on a Tuesday afternoon. She did not have any family nearby, so she called the local fire department to report a vague emergency. When the big red truck arrived with sirens blaring, the crew rushed inside with axes and hoses ready. They found her sitting in her armchair with a pot of tea and some biscuits. She smiled and asked the sweating firefighters if they wanted a drink and a chat. The captain had to gently explain that they could not be her social club, even though the cookies looked delicious. 18. A furious young man stood on a street corner feeling cheated after a business transaction went totally wrong. He had given $20 to a local dealer for some illegal substances, but the dealer just walked away with the cash. The man felt this was a breach of contract and called 911 to report a robbery. He told the police that a thief stole his money and failed to deliver the drugs. The officers arrived and were amazed by his honesty about the crime he was trying to commit. They arrested him for attempted possession while he argued that he was the victim of fraud. 19. A tired nurse returned home from a long shift and just wanted to sleep in her quiet apartment. She heard the faint sound of a television coming from the unit next door, and it made her blood boil. Instead of knocking on the wall, she picked up her phone and dialed 911 immediately. She told the operator that the noise pollution was killing her, and she needed a SWAT team to silence the neighbor. The police arrived to find the neighbor was actually deaf and watching the news with the volume up. They asked him to turn it down while the nurse peeked through her peephole, feeling embarrassed. 20. A very drunk man was celebrating his birthday alone in his apartment and felt the party was too quiet. He decided he needed a choir to sing to him, so he dialed 911 on his cell phone. He slurred his words and demanded that the officers at the station sing happy birthday to him right now. The dispatcher told him to hang up, but he kept calling back to make the request. Police were sent to his location to check on his welfare. They found him with a cupcake and a candle. Instead of singing, they gave him a ticket for misuse of emergency services. 21. A devoted cat mom looked up at the massive oak tree in her yard and saw her beloved tabby Mr. Whiskers sitting on a high branch. He had been up there for 2 days and she was convinced he was starving to death. She dialed 911 and demanded the fire department bring their tallest ladder immediately. She screamed that her baby was dying of exposure right in front of her eyes. The dispatcher calmly explained that cats always come down eventually. The woman cried hysterically until the cat got bored. He climbed down backwards and walked inside for dinner while she stood there feeling foolish. 22. A nervous suburban dad in New Jersey looked out his kitchen window and saw a dark shadow moving near the shed. He panicked instantly and gathered his family in the living room for safety. He dialed 911 with shaking hands to report a massive black bear invading his property. He whispered to the operator that the beast was looking for blood. The police arrived with rifles ready to protect the neighborhood from the predator. They crept into the backyard only to find a very fat raccoon eating a discarded pizza crust. The dad insisted it looked much bigger in the dark, while the officers laughed at him. 23. A grumpy old man bought a chocolate cone from a park vendor on a hot summer afternoon to cool off. He took a massive bite and immediately felt a sharp pain shoot through his sensitive teeth. He became enraged at the product and felt he had been assaulted by the temperature. He pulled out his flip phone and called 911 to report a dangerous food item. He told the police the ice cream was defective and hazardous to his health. The operator asked if he needed an ambulance. The man just wanted the vendor arrested for selling ice that was too cold. The dispatcher hung up on him. 24. A lazy teenager was lying on the sofa trying to watch his favorite cartoon, but the TV was off. He looked everywhere for the remote control, but it had vanished completely under the messy furniture. He refused to stand up to change the channel manually because that required effort. He called 911 and asked the police to send a search team to his house. He told the dispatcher that a piece of vital property was missing. The operator realized it was a remote and threatened to send a squad car to tell his parents instead. The boy found the remote under a pizza box immediately. 25. A hungry woman sat in a fast food booth and took a bite of her French fries expecting hot, crispy perfection. Instead, she tasted a lukewarm potato that was barely room temperature. She marched to the counter, but the manager refused to give her a fresh batch for free. She felt this was a criminal injustice, so she dialed 911 right in the lobby. She shouted that she was being robbed of her money and served inedible garbage. The police officer on the line asked if she was being threatened. She said the cold fries were the threat. The other customers filmed her meltdown for the internet. 26. A dramatic online shopper received a large package from Amazon and sliced it open with excitement. She saw thousands of white foam packing peanuts surrounding her item and instantly panicked. She was convinced she was allergic to the foam and that simply touching it would be fatal. She ran to the other room and dialed 911 for a hazmat team. She told the operator that a biological weapon had been mailed to her house. The firefighters arrived to inspect the box. They picked up a peanut and ate it to show it was made of cornstarch. The woman stood there blushing while they laughed at the starch. 27. A forgetful young man stepped out onto his porch to grab the morning newspaper in his bathrobe. The wind blew the front door shut behind him, and he heard the lock click into place. He realized he was stuck outside in his underwear without a key or phone. He saw a neighbor walking by and borrowed their cell to call 911 instead of a locksmith. He demanded the fire department break down his door because he was cold. The operator told him to call a locksmith. He argued that taxes pay for door opening services. He eventually had to break his own window with a rock. 28. A terrifying buzzing sound woke up a college student in her small studio apartment on a Sunday morning. She spotted a single hornet flying near the ceiling fan and decided her life was over. She hid under the heavy blanket and dialed 911 for an emergency extraction team. She whispered that a deadly flying monster had taken control of her living space. The dispatcher asked if she was allergic to stings. She said no, but she was allergic to fear. The operator told her to open a window and stop wasting time. She spent the next 3 hours hiding in the closet until it flew away. 29. A self-righteous electric vehicle owner pulled into a shopping center charging station with low battery anxiety. He saw a gas-guzzling pickup truck parked right in the only available charging spot. He felt this was a direct attack on the environment and his personal convenience. He called 911 to demand the immediate towing and arrest of the truck driver. He screamed that this was a crime against the planet and he needed justice. The dispatcher explained that parking disputes are not police emergencies. The man stood by the truck guarding it for an hour until the owner returned. He yelled while the truck driver just drove away laughing. 30. A frustrated middle-aged man spent 40 minutes on hold with his cable internet provider. When a representative finally answered, she was slightly sarcastic about his bill payment history. The man took this personally and felt his honor had been insulted by the employee. He hung up the phone and immediately dialed 911 to file a harassment report. He told the police that a woman on the phone had hurt his feelings and was being mean. The dispatcher sighed and told him that being rude is not illegal. The man threatened to sue the police department for not arresting the cable company for bad service. 31. A grumpy old man sat on his porch trying to read his newspaper in total silence. Across the street, a group of happy teenagers were shooting hoops in their own driveway. The rhythmic thumping of the ball against the pavement drove the man absolutely crazy. He felt this noise was a violation of his peace treaty with the world. He marched inside and dialed 911 to report a violent gang disturbance. He told the dispatcher that thugs were assaulting the neighborhood with rubber weapons. The police arrived to find kids playing a friendly game. The officer high-fived the teens while the old man glared through his blinds in defeat. 32. A thrifty middle-aged woman stood at the checkout counter of a busy Walmart with a cart full of groceries. She handed the cashier a coupon for 50 cents off laundry detergent. The cashier scanned it and politely informed her that it had expired 3 years ago. The woman flew into a rage and refused to accept this financial loss. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right in the lane. She screamed that the store was trying to rob her of her legal currency. The line of customers behind her groaned in agony. The dispatcher told her to pay the 50 cents or leave the store immediately. 33. A stressed business traveler was packing his suitcase for a flight and realized he had a major problem. He weighed his bag on the bathroom scale, and it was 5 pounds over the limit. He panicked because he did not want to pay the extra fees. He sat on his bed and dialed 911 for legal advice on aviation laws. He asked the operator if the airline could legally charge him for his heavy socks. The dispatcher was confused and asked if there was a crime. The man said the baggage fee was the crime. The operator told him to unpack a sweater and stop tying up the emergency line. 34. A caffeine-addicted young woman sat in her car in the drive-thru line of a popular coffee chain. She had been waiting for exactly 4 minutes and started to lose her mind. She felt the delay was a personal attack on her morning schedule. She tapped her steering wheel aggressively and dialed 911 to report the slow service. She told the police that the baristas were holding her hostage by moving too slow. She demanded an officer come and speed up the espresso machine. The dispatcher laughed and told her to make coffee at home. The woman screamed out her window while the staff ignored her completely. 35. A confused elderly gentleman sat down at his desk to check his emails, but the screen remained black. He pressed the power button repeatedly, but nothing happened at all. He felt cut off from the world and panic set in quickly. He picked up his landline and dialed 911 for technical support. He told the operator that his internet machine was broken and he needed a cyber unit. The dispatcher asked if there was a fire or medical issue. The man said his lack of email was a medical emergency for his stress levels. The operator gently suggested he check if the computer was plugged into the wall socket. 36. A grumpy neighbor tried to sleep, but his bedroom was illuminated by a festive glow from next door. The family across the fence had installed a massive holiday light display that rivaled the sun. The man felt blinded by the Christmas spirit and refused to buy curtains. He called 911 to report a light pollution crime in progress. He told the police that his neighbor was firing a laser beam into his brain. The officers drove by and saw a very nice Santa display. They told the man to wear a sleep mask. The neighbor added even more twinkling lights the next day just to spite him. 37. A disorganized young man was running late for a very important job interview and could not find his keys. He tore his apartment apart, throwing cushions and papers everywhere in a panic. He felt the universe was conspiring against him, so he took drastic action. He dialed 911 and demanded that the police send a detective to locate his property. He screamed that his keys had been stolen by a ghost or a thief. The dispatcher asked if there was a break-in. The man admitted he just lost them. The operator hung up. He found the keys in his own pocket 10 seconds later and felt incredibly dumb. 38. A fashionable woman walked into her dry cleaners to pick up her favorite silk blouse. She held it up and realized it looked like it would fit a toddler. The shock was too much for her to handle civilly. She refused to leave the store and dialed 911 while the owner watched. She told the police that a murder had occurred and the victim was her fashion sense. She demanded the cleaner be arrested for destruction of expensive property. The dispatcher explained that laundry accidents are not police matters. The woman stormed out crying while clutching the tiny shirt. The dry cleaner just shrugged his shoulders. 39. A frantic homeowner was watching a movie when suddenly his entire house went pitch black. He looked out the window and saw that all his neighbors still had their lights on. He felt targeted by the electric grid and panicked immediately. He called 911 to report that the city had singled him out for darkness. He screamed that he was under attack by a blackout. The fire department arrived to investigate the mysterious failure. They walked to the garage and flipped the circuit breaker switch back on. The lights returned instantly. The man stood there in his bathrobe while the firefighters rolled their eyes at him. 40. A party animal ran out of beverages at 2 in the morning and needed a refill urgently. He stumbled around the streets but could not find an open shop anywhere. He decided the police would know the best spots in town. He dialed 911 and slurred his request for directions to the nearest liquor store. He told the operator that his hydration levels were critically low. The dispatcher was not amused and asked for his location. A patrol car showed up not to give directions, but to give him a ride to the drunk tank. He sat in the back asking if they had beer. 41. A lazy grown man in his 30s woke up with a slightly throbbing big toe. He looked at it and decided it was a medical crisis requiring immediate attention. He lived only 3 blocks from the hospital, but walking or driving seemed like too much effort. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911 to request a free taxi ride in an ambulance. He told the dispatcher he was immobile and needed a stretcher crew. The paramedics arrived and saw him walking around his kitchen looking for snacks. They told him to put on shoes and walk to the clinic. He was furious they wouldn't carry him down the stairs like a king. 42. A paranoid suburban homeowner looked at his front porch and saw a brown box sitting by the door. He immediately forgot that he had ordered a blender 2 days ago. Panic took over his brain, and he assumed it was a dangerous trap sent by his enemies. He dialed 911 and reported a suspicious device ticking on his property. The bomb squad actually deployed to the scene and cordoned off the street. A robot approached the box and carefully opened it. Inside, they found a cheap kitchen appliance and the receipt with the man's name on it. The neighbors watched and laughed while he apologized to the police chief. 43. A young couple decided to have a romantic movie night with a large pepperoni pizza. There was one slice left in the box, and the tension in the room skyrocketed. The boyfriend grabbed it and ate it in one bite without asking. The woman felt betrayed on a spiritual level and decided this was domestic abuse. She dialed 911 and screamed that a theft had occurred in her living room. She told the operator that her partner stole her property and she wanted him removed. The police arrived to find 2 adults arguing over crust. The officer told them to buy another pizza or break up immediately. 44. A thirsty office worker stood in the break room, staring at a bag of chips stuck on the glass. He had put his last dollar into the machine, and it had betrayed him completely. He shook the heavy machine, but the snack refused to fall down. He felt he had been robbed in broad daylight, so he called 911 for backup. He demanded that the police come and force the machine to release his property. The dispatcher asked if he was trapped or hurt. He said his wallet was hurt. The operator told him to call the number on the sticker. He hung up and kicked the machine instead. 45. A bored, eccentric man was browsing the internet late at night and decided he needed an exotic companion. He found a website selling capuchin monkeys and got very excited about the idea. Instead of using Google like a normal person, he dialed 911 for legal consultation. He asked the emergency operator if he would get arrested for owning a jungle animal in the city. The dispatcher was confused and told him to call animal control or a lawyer during business hours. The man argued that his curiosity was an emergency. The police did not appreciate his quest for knowledge and warned him about tying up the line with trivia. 46. A nervous man lived alone in a creepy old house and used a sleep tracking app on his phone. In the morning, he listened to the recording and heard a terrifying guttural growl. He was convinced a demon or intruder was watching him sleep. He called 911 and whispered that a monster was in his bedroom at night. The police arrived to investigate the potential break-in. They listened to the audio clip and recognized the sound immediately. The officer told the man that the scary beast was just his own nose snoring. The man refused to believe it until he heard himself breathe. He felt incredibly awkward. 47. A teenage gamer was in the middle of a high-stakes online tournament when disaster struck hard. His character froze on the screen because the internet connection dropped to a crawl. He screamed at the router and felt his career was being destroyed by lag. He picked up his phone and dialed 911 to report a service outage. He told the dispatcher that his life was in danger because he was losing the game. The operator asked if he needed an ambulance. The teen demanded a technician with fiber optic cables. The dispatcher told him to read a book. The boy cried while his team lost the match without him. 48. A wealthy woman walked out to her driveway to admire her brand new luxury convertible. She gasped in horror when she saw a large white splatter of bird droppings on the pristine hood. She felt this was a targeted act of vandalism by nature. She dialed 911 and demanded that the police investigate which bird committed the crime. She wanted an officer to file a report for property damage against the local wildlife. The dispatcher had to mute the microphone to laugh. He told her to use a hose and some soap. She was insulted that the police would not arrest the bird for ruining her morning aesthetic. 49. A sensitive neighbor was gardening in his backyard when a strong scent drifted over the wooden fence. The man next door had applied way too much cheap body spray before his date. The gardener felt his nose hairs burning and decided this was a chemical attack. He called 911 and reported a hazardous material leak in the area. He told the police that toxic fumes were invading his property and he couldn't breathe. The fire department rushed to the scene with gas masks. They sniffed the air and realized it was just bad cologne. They told the neighbor to shower and the gardener to stop being so dramatic. And there you have it, 49. Absolute geniuses who think the police exist just to fix their bad manicures and cold fries. If this list made you feel significantly smarter than the average person, do yourself a favor and hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe to BrainFumble and turn on notifications so you never miss out on this level of madness. Share this video with a friend who complains too much. Now I have to know, which one of these callers deserves the worst human award? Was it the nugget guy or the lady afraid of packing peanuts? Roast them in the comments below.